Muses of Mythology is a spoiler-heavy podcast.
That's an understatement.
We're going to discuss not just the events of this book, but the Rhineverse as a whole, and really anything that we feel is relevant. You can find full spoiler warnings in the show notes. And, I can peel the sticker off. Sorry, there's a $5 off sticker on my copy of the Iliad for the longest time, and I didn't know I could take it off. It came off so easy. Welcome to Muses of Mythology, a podcast where we explore how ancient myths become part of modern pop culture through the lens of Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. This is Story 75, Achilles and Patroclus. I'm your co-host and podcasting muse, Darien Smart. Joining me is my co-host and brother, DJ.
How's everybody doing today? I am the muse of roommates, good and bad. They all consult me as to how they should act, and yes, I do tell them to act bad.
DJ, I feel like this last run has been a little unhinged. And I just need to acknowledge.
Don't even worry about it. They were roommates, Darien.
They were. Oh my gods, they were roommates. We need to muse around in the garden for a bit. I need to reflect on this for a moment. All right, I have a feeling that this is going to be a longer one. So let's not beat around the bush. Possibly. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's get right started. I'm going to introduce our guest. It is Megs, former co-host of the Monstrous Woman podcast and friend of the pod who is now in grad school because they're super smart and very cool. Also, they are working on a short story novella about Sappho. Is that a thing I can talk about?
Yeah, sure. I don't know when I'll have the time to attempt to find a publisher, but it exists. And at some point in my life, yeah, at some point in my life, people will be able to read it.
Any publishers out there, anyone with connections to publishers, reach out to Megs. Their contact information will be in the show notes. This is a very cool story they have created. You're going to want it. You want to put it out in the world and make money off of it.
Yeah, heavily about muses as well.
Hey.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so, Megs, why are you here today? You asked for this topic.
I did.
Grandiose topic.
We're gonna announce
well, you also requested Thetis, but that didn't work out because grad school. So I'm really psyched we get this one.
I'm really psyched too. I love talking about Achilles and Patroclus. I love talking about queer folks in myth and queer folks in ancient Greece and like how we project our American views onto that and how interesting that is. Very excited.
Fantastic. All right, let's jump right in. Hey, DJ.
What's up?
What do you remember about Achilles in the Percy Jackson books?
I don't. Does he even show up? Is he the one?
He does.
He shows up. Oh God, fuck! I don't even remember when he shows up.
DJ, you're so good at SAT testing context clues.
Dude.
If you have to guess, what would it make sense for in Percy's journey in The Last Olympian for Achilles to show up?
I mean, at the River Styx.
Yes.
He shows up at the River Styx?
He shows up at the River Styx. A shade appears.
I straight up don't remember that. I don't remember it at all. I barely remember Theseus showing up in battle.
Yeah, Theseus is a weirdly blink and you miss it. But, yes, Achilles shows up right before Percy takes the most unpleasant bath of his life. Mm-hmm. I think the chapter is actually, I take the worst bath ever. I take the worst bath ever. Yes, it is. And so, it's funny because he appears, he's a shade. They're in the underworld. But I would say Achilles appears in a truly dramatic fashion, which is on point for the Achilles we will get to know throughout this episode. Mm-hmm. So, Nico is, like, preparing Percy, warning him about what is about to happen when he jumps into the River Styx. You have to prepare yourself first, Nico said, or the river will destroy you. It'll burn away your body and soul. Sounds fun, I muttered. This is no joke, Nico warned. This is the only way to stay anchored to your mortal life. You have to... He glanced behind me and his eyes widened. I turned and found myself face to face with a Greek warrior. Just absolutely
he just appears
at his shoulder, just standing there waiting, just You'll notice me time.
Okay, now I am remembering this scene. I do remember him giving the warning and being like, I gave up all but part of my humanity.
Yeah, he's tall and buff. He looks a lot like Ares. A cruel, scarred face and closely shaven black hair. Never mind that Homer described this motherfucker as blonde more than once.
Black hair.
Yeah.
This is blonde erasure.
Because if there's one underrepresented group,
it's blonde
it's the
people.
blondes. All right. First Annabeth, now this. And that's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. And I'm going to say it one more time. That was
and
a
if you
silly,
ever
silly
say
joke.
that seriously, you're the problem.
Yeah. No, this was a silly, silly joke I just made. But his eyes were human, pale green like a shallow sea, and a bloody arrow stuck out of his left calf, just above the ankle. I sucked at Greek names, but even I knew the greatest warrior of all time, who had died from a wounded heel. Achilles. The ghost nodded. I warned the other not to follow my path. Now I will warn you. And basically, Achilles' whole thing is like, it'll make you do not do this. It'll make you powerful, but it'll also make you weak. Your prowess in combat will be beyond any mortals, but your weaknesses, your failings will increase as well. Percy's like, couldn't I just wear something besides sandals? The heel is only my physical weakness, demigod. My mother, Thetis, held me there while she dipped me in the Styx. What really killed me was my own arrogance. Beware, turn back.
Dude, I gotta say, it must be wild for Achilles in this point. He straight up warned Luke, and then like a week later, another demigod shows up, and he's like,
wild.
Dude, it's been 3,000 years, and no one's done this since me, and now 2 people in a week. This is insane.
Yeah. He's like, I'm sure, shocked. He makes the whole thing. He's like, let the gods know that I tried to warn you against this.
Yeah.
Why is the arrow still in his heel? I just don't understand. Like, because I just think we could have put it together without that.
Yeah, I think it's the aspect of like, shades / ghosts look like how they died. Weapon. Like, I mean, you see it in a lot of media, right? Like ghosts with just axes in their heads and arrows in them and shit like that. So I assume it's probably just that.
That's got to be really frustrating.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, right.
Just very inconvenient. He can never wear Crocs. It's so sad.
No. And what a shame.
And what a shame, truly. Says
He can
the
wear Crocs. They
millennial
don't quite
to the
reach
Gen
the
Z.
Achilles tendon. Crocs don't reach the Achilles tendon. It's fine. He can wear them.
He could wear them in, what is that, attack mode? Or defense
It's
mode?
leisure mode. It's leisure mode, and
Yeah.
I got to put these puppies in 4-wheel drive.
I regret my decisions. Fan art of Achilles showing off his new Crocs to Patroclus, please. Thank you. No, but so I think, DJ have a point. Like, it's pretty common to see ghosts who still bear the wounds that killed them, except you brought up Theseus earlier. And when Percy sees Theseus, he describes him as looking very young, not much older than he himself is. But Theseus is actually one of the few, heroes of Greek myth who, in most stories, lived to be an old man. Like, he didn't die shortly after the Minotaur thing. He did a lot more stuff.
It could also be, now hear me out here, the aspect that ghosts can change their form to different parts of their lives. And Achilles is like, if I'm giving off warnings, this has got to be the best warning, right? The downfall, my hubris on display right in front of everybody. Here's the arrow that killed me because I chose to take a dip, or I didn't choose to take a dip, but I took a dip in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Achilles is super dramatic, so I would totally buy that. Like, even if it was a choice, he just, walks around with that arrow in his...
Yeah. He probably walks around in Patroclus' favorite form of him. And then when it's I gotta go to work, he puts the arrow in.
I was gonna say the exact same thing, DJ. He and Patroclus are just hanging out on the Isle of the Blessed, and he's like, shit, babe, I gotta go.
I'll be
There's
right
another
back.
demigod at the river Styx, and you know what that means. No, I'll be right back. Hold on. He's like, Patroclus is like, babe, don't forget your arrow. Oh my god, thank you so much.
Shink.
So that's Achilles. That he does get a scene. Now, DJ, I'm going to volley it to you again. What do you remember about Achilles and Patroclus in the Percy Jackson series?
I didn't realize Patroclus showed up.
He does not. It was a trick question.
That's what I thought. Stop gaslighting me, Darren. I don't appreciate it.
That's not Me bullying you is not me.
It's a little gaslighty of you to try to trick me with a trick question.
But you are so good at taking SAT test questions. You solved it on purpose.
Matter.
But it's much like how Thetis doesn't appear, but we still talk to her because we identified that May Castell and Sally Jackson had moments that reflected her myth and her story. Mm-hmm. That is the same for Patroclus.
Yeah,
and Achilles.
It's Clarice and Selena.
Yes, it
Got
is.
it.
Good job, DJ.
Got it.
What? Well,
I wanted to say Sabrina, but I'm like, that's not right. I know
it's
that.
Not right, but it was really close, and I would have given it to you. I
remembered her last name. I'm like Beauregard, but what the fuck is it?
Wow. So yeah, Selena and Clarice reenact the tragedy of Patroclus and the wrath of Achilles. Mm-hmm. Do you want to fill in those details?
Megs, would you like to take this one? I do know the details, but Megs hasn't talked in a bit.
That's true. We haven't let Megs talk in a bit.
Yeah, so obviously I guess I shouldn't say obviously because that could come across like I'm an asshole, but in the myth, there comes a time where Achilles, his feelings are hurt, essentially, and he's a little jealous. As we've established, he's kind of a dramatic bitch. And he's like, I'm not going to fight, despite the fact that will undoubtedly turn the tide of the war. And his boyfriend, Patroclus, kind of puts up with it for a while, but eventually is like, people are dying. We have to do something. Just let me wear your armor. You don't have to fight, but we'll still kind of get like the credit of you fighting. Of course, Patroclus then dies because he's not Achilles. And then Achilles is driven to a gay rage. And then he murders the person who murdered Patroclus, and he drags his body around for a very long time until his father comes and begs for it. It's kind of fucked up. And then he's like, mix our ashes, and people are like, oh my god, they were such good friends, but I personally don't really want to be buried with my friends, so yeah, they shared a tent because there wasn't that much room on the beach, okay? Yeah. Like, stop jumping to conclusions. Yeah. It was cold at night.
Me in the same graveyard as my friends, but the same grave?
Mix my ashes together feels a little romantic.
Yeah. Just a touch.
Not maybe in a positive way, but in a like Wuthering Heights Heathcliff way that is queer coded.
No, it's important to distinguish.
Nobody here is claiming it was healthy, but everyone's claiming it was gay.
Yes, we can contain multitudes.
Gay people can be toxic, is what we're saying.
It's a fact. It's just a fact.
And anyway, so to Percy Jackson, Clarice and Selena have a very close, what Rick Riordan calls friendships, what I would call lesbian before they realize, relationship. And Clarice is angry because of a chariot. There's like a ownership dispute over a chariot.
DJ loves to talk about this.
I side with Ares. Yeah. That is absolutely, Ares has that right to the chariot. Like, holy fuck, dude. They led and planned the whole raid. Just because Apollo, seized the chariot, that doesn't mean anything. It means that the chariot goes into the pool and everybody gets to greed.
Isn't the conflict like heavily involving Will Solus as well?
Well, he happens to be the cabin leader, doesn't he? Because, or at least the stand-in.
I think it's Michael Yu.
I think Michael Yu was injured at this point.
No, not yet. When they're having the meeting, I think it's because I don't think we don't get Will Solus's name until Annabeth is injured.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
He becomes the acting after Michael Yu dies on the bridge. That's right.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
So, Selena and Clarice. Clarice is pissed about not getting the flying chariot.
Yeah. And so same kind of situation where Selena steps in and pretends to be Clarice through wearing her armor, but doesn't have the same physical prowess, so dies. And it's very tragic and queer.
I think it's specifically the Drakon that they're fighting is prophesized to only die at the hands of a child of Ares. And because Selena's pissed, and so none of the Ares cabins are in Manhattan during the beginning of the battle, they send the Drakon knowing it won't be killed. And then Selena shows up in the armor, dies just in time for Clarice to show up, with Selena dying in her arms in a totally platonic, heterosexual kind of way. They also, at this time, Selena confesses that she's been the spy this whole time.
Tragic.
Clarice goes on a rampage with the blessing of Ares, just murks the dragon, and then proceeds to drag its body around Manhattan, demanding for more people to challenge her.
Yeah. Wild. Truly wild response to grief. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I don't respect it, but...
Well, super just sped run depression or denial right into anger. Right into anger.
Yeah.
You know?
Skips multiple steps.
We're done with this. We're in anger. We've went through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, back to anger, baby. We're dabbed out this shit up again.
Yep.
Yeah. It feels like an attempt to like aggressively outrun crying. It's like, I don't want to be sad. I'm just going to do something fucked up instead.
Clarice is the type. Yeah, I believe that.
Clarice is absolutely the type. So it's funny because Percy is the one who like bathes in the Styx and gets the like whole curse of Achilles' immortality. I think it would be easy to read. Oh, in this Last Olympian, which is supposed to be our Iliad story, Percy is Achilles. Percy is absolutely not Achilles. That is part Clarice and part Luke Castellan. Like, those are our Achilles stand-ins. Percy, much like in the Sea of Monsters where he was not Odysseus, that was Annabeth, Percy is just here.
Mm-hmm. And we love.
He is telling the story. He is whoever is narrating the Iliad. That is Percy.
Percy's right a bard.
A bard. Percy would make a great bard. So those are our big moments. So this episode isn't just about Achilles. It's about Achilles and Patroclus for a reason. Because it's that bond that I think was most interesting to talk about. First up, how do y'all want to be pronouncing Patroclus?
That's fine.
The way you just did.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. There's multiple pronunciations, different ways to do it. I just say it the way Achilles says it in Hades. Because I can hear his voice in my head, and that's how I remember how to say it. I would like to show y'all briefly my copy of the Iliad that we will be referencing through this episode.
Yep.
Translation by Emily Wilson.
Okay.
If I can just show you.
Yeah, a lot of little notes to be had.
There will be a lot of me editing out the sound of me being, no, it's not this one. Hold on, because I did not label any of my sticky notes.
Sounds like you need to start color coding sticky notes.
I've never had this problem before. Never have I been like, I gotta reference this passage. No, this is really, I gotta reference. In one book, usually I have 6 different books with 2 or 3 in it. Now I just have the Iliad and one of the Odyssey. We'll get to that later. Feel free to interject at any time, obviously. DJ, interrupt for jokes. Megs, interrupt for insightful knowledge.
Okay.
Because y'all, this may be one of my longest research notes in podcast history. I wanted to dig into this.
I'm gonna say this right now. If it gets to 8:00 and we are not done recording, I'm just gonna get off because I do work tomorrow.
Oh shit, that's right. Okay, yeah. I'll make it. No, I'll make it work. It'll be fine.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to go how like whatever pace you want to. It's fine. I've jumped out of an episode before, and I'm sure Megs would love to sign off with you rather than it be me, right?
Megs, who is 2 hours ahead in Florida and probably also has things in the morning.
Right, yeah, probably. But
nothing I have to leave my house for.
Oh, stellar. All right, well, Megs, if DJ leaves, you will have to echo me when I say don't be like Zeus at the end. Can you take on this responsibility?
Yes.
Fantastic. Let's begin. Okay, so I wanted to start with Patroclus because Achilles always comes first, and I felt like
we gotta save
he
the
deserves.
best for last.
That's not what I meant. No. It's much like how we did Ariadne before Theseus. I have a mission in life.
Yes, I support.
Okay, so Patroclus was the son of Meonotus, who was actually one of the Argonauts. So he ran with Jason. Fun fact. In childhood or adolescence at some point in time, he accidentally killed a friend after getting angry over a game of dice.
Yeah, it happens.
This is a yikes.
Too, but don't worry about it. Dice get serious. You know.
Dice do get serious. He does feel really bad about this, and it does say, well, his shade says when he brings it up towards the end of the Iliad that this was in fact an accident. But regardless, it results in him being sent to Phthia, which is where he met Achilles. And Achilles' father, Peleus, named Patroclus Achilles' steward and companion. Noteworthy in the Iliad, Nestor, who's another one of the warriors, the soldiers, the characters, says that Patroclus is Achilles' elder. But Patroclus' shade will later state that they were raised together, which kind of makes him read like they were more peers. Because there's like, if there's someone your elder by like 10 years, you weren't raised together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say in the context of Achilles and Patroclus' relationship, it would make more sense for Achilles to be older, even though that's like not consistent in the writing, just because like the actual relationships that were acceptable between men in ancient Greece were either boys before they interacted with girls because their education was separate, and so it was like normal for teenage boys like throughout puberty to have relationships with one another, or it was normal for powerful men to have relationships with younger, less powerful men, which would have like necessitated Achilles being older. So I do think the age dispute is just really interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're going to circle back to later, because it also, like, going with Achilles being, like, older, more powerful, something I'll note later on is that Achilles was trained by Chiron in both, like, warfare and medical arts, and that's something he teaches to Patroclus later on. So it definitely, like, their relationship, like that seems like the framework would be Achilles is older, but, as we'll note later, Patroclus is the one that folks are expecting to, like, counsel Achilles and get him to stop this pouting thing he's been doing. People are dying. Time to knock it off, Achilles. As we noted earlier, they share a tent on the beach, and these two just hang out and play music together while Achilles is like, I'm not going to fight anymore. So even Patroclus is like, okay, I guess I won't either. Because it's not noted that Patroclus is going back to battle when Achilles is like, I'm out. So they're just both hanging out. At one point in time, Agamemnon sends... Because the reason that Achilles isn't fighting is because he's pissed. He's got some beef with Agamemnon. We will get into that later. This is Patroclus' story. So he sends some embassies. They send him away. Eventually, Nestor comes back. Achilles sends Patroclus out to talk to him, and he urges Patroclus, you need to convince Achilles to go back into the battle, because as his father reminded you, and you seem to have forgotten, you need to counsel him in, like, guidance and wisdom. And also because you are his elder, so it is your place to do this. And if that doesn't work, you need to get his armor and lead the battle yourself. Which, the latter, a wild call. Nestor, why don't you get the armor? Why is this Patroclus' responsibility to get the armor? Eventually, the war was not going well for the Greeks at this time. Directly because Zeus had turned the tides to favor the Trojans after Thetis encouraged him to do so, after Achilles asked her to do so to get back at Agamemnon for embarrassing him.
Well, this was when Achilles didn't realize he was going to have to be in the war effort.
Well, he's already... So the Iliad starts at the end of the Trojan War.
Oh, weird.
So he's been fighting this entire time, and then at the beginning of the Iliad, I'm not going to fight anymore because I've got beef with Agamemnon. More on that later. So he fought, and he's done, like, they've been doing very well. Well as you can do when you've been fighting for 9 years. But the Trojans have this wall thing. So comes a point where it's going so bad that the Trojans have breached their defenses and are threatening the ships. Like, they are going to burn the Greek ships so they will not be able to return home, no matter what happens. And this is when Patroclus is finally like, Achilles, like, we have to get involved. I actually do want to read this passage because I thought it was very... This is from book 16 of the Iliad, called Love and Death Vibes. A lot of what I'm going to be reading here is from book 16 of the Iliad, called Love and Death. So fought the Greeks around the mighty galley. Patroclus stood beside his friend Achilles, the shepherd of the people, letting fall hot tears like some black stream that pours dark water down a steep rock face where no goats can tread. Swift-footed Lord Achilles looked at him and pitied him and let his words take flight. And essentially he's like, why are you crying? Like, come on, you don't need to cry. And Patroclus is basically like, How can a person in the future learn anything good from you if you refuse to save the Greeks from this catastrophe? You have no pity. Peleus the horseman is not your father. Thetis is not your mother. Grace and soaring rocks gave birth to you, and so you have an unrelenting heart. I just want to keep reading. Sorry. Okay.
No, you're fine.
So essentially that's enough for Achilles is still refusing to fight, but he does give Patroclus his armor. And the armor like he was given to him by his father, and tells him basically like, all right, use this because it'll scare the Trojans. They'll think I've returned to the battlefield, lead our armies, and drive them away from the boats. But once you've done that, return to camp. Do not drive them back to the city. Don't try to take the city. Because you'll make me look bad, essentially. You'll steal glory from me. But yeah, for real, we should probably protect the boats. And so Patroclus does that. One thing that I always thought was that Patroclus stole the armor, and it was like a trick like the Greeks didn't know. And that's from the way Rick Riordan plays it in the book. But that's not true. Like, everyone knew that they were following Patroclus. The trick was just to be on the Trojans. And Patroclus is super successful because he is also a very talented warrior.
Yeah.
He drives the Trojans back, but is so swept up in the battle, he keeps pushing forward. And it's Zeus is kind of getting in his head a little bit and encouraged, like he's looking down and trying to figure out, well, how am I going to slaughter Patroclus? Like, what way will I do this? Okay, I'll let him keep pushing forward, keep moving. And the battle is so intense that Hector, the great hero of Troy, has also skipped back into town. So they reach like the battlefield in front of Troy. And Zeus gets involved specifically. So now he made Patroclus yearn for battle. Patroclus, when the gods began to call you to death, whom did you kill? Whom first, whom last? Astraeus the first, Adonis, Asclepius, Pyramus, son of Megas, and Epistor, Polaris, Palameus, Molinus, and Elias. He killed all these, and others turned all their thoughts to flight. The Greeks Then would the Greeks have taken the high-walled Troy. Patroclus rushed with such firm purpose in his hands and spear. Had Apollo not taken his position on the sturdy watchtower to defend the Trojans and bring danger to Patroclus. Literally, Apollo gets directly involved. Give up, Patroclus. It is not your fate to make the Trojans fall beneath your spear. Even Achilles will not take this city, although he is superior to you. Patroclus yielded to avoid the wrath of Phoebus, who can strike from far away. And at this time, Apollo goes to Hector and is like, hey man, yeah, you should get back involved in the fight. No, it'll be fine. Maybe I'll even let you defeat Patroclus. Who knows? But you should get back in the fight. And then here we have something I like to call Rick Riordan really uses the whole gods can't directly interfere as plot convenience for his stories.
Yes.
Because Apollo goes straight to the battlefield, basically bops Patroclus in the forehead to stun him, and just steals all of his armor. Like his helmet, his breast. He just takes the armor straight off this man's body. And Patroclus is like, ooh, shoot, that's not great. And just before, he gets stabbed in the gut by a spear. Not a spear, by Hector. Mind you, Hector hasn't gotten here yet. This is from another gentleman.
This is from a Normandy lad who just doesn't matter.
Dardanian Euphoribus, son of Pantheos, had hurled it from very close at hand. He was best of all men his age at throwing spears and horsemanship and sprinting on quick feet.
So just a nobody.
Well, he was very good at war, had just shown up to Troy, and had already killed like 20 dudes.
Fuck, who's not very good at war at this point, dude? Come on.
I guess after 9 years, who do you have left?
The people who are great at war.
Yeah, true. So Patroclus is stunned by a god and stabbed with a spear. So he does start to try to retreat. And this is when Hector shows up. But Hector saw brave Patroclus wounded and retreating. He muscled through the crowd, got near Patroclus, and speared him underneath the ribs and drove the bronze point through his body. With a thud, he fell. Hector does think he's going to gloat about this. And he's like, oh, you thought you were going to sack Troy. You thought you were going to win. But, you're a fool, and you should have listened to Achilles when he told you to retreat. Though little strength remains to you, Patroclus, you answered, Hector, you make big boasts now. Zeus, son of Cronos, and Apollo gave you victory, and with ease the gods have crushed me. They took the arms and armor from my body. If 20 Lin like you had challenged me, all of them would have died beneath my spear. But cruel destiny and Leto's son Apollo killed me, and my human killer, Euryphorbus. You were the third to slaughter me. But I will tell you this, take it to heart. You surely have not long to live. Your death and overwhelming fate stand near you now. The hands of great Achilles will defeat you.
Yeah.
Like, as far as ways to die go, pretty fucking metal. I'm just gonna say.
You're just wait till my boyfriend shows up.
Kinda, yeah. Hey, I want you to know you didn't kill me. A god and that other guy killed me. But my boyfriend is gonna kill you.
Yeah. You may have gotten the last hit, but that doesn't mean you bested me, bitch.
Yeah, exactly that.
It's also really interesting because Patroclus is one of the only men in Greek myth who is described as like being exceedingly kind and kind of like a soft figure. And so to see him kind of like step into anger here.
I'll bite my thumb at the fuck you, Hector.
Yeah. Yeah. Is really interesting. And I think also like speaks to how close he is to Achilles and is just like, you don't want to piss that man off and you just did like the thing that will. And of course there was the prophecy that Achilles wouldn't die before Hector. And so Hector had been safe for so long because Achilles wanted to prolong his own life. But, you know, Patroclus knew him enough to be like, well, if I'm dead, all bets are off.
This is game over for you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you're dead now, too.
Bye.
I really hate to see it, but I love it. Like, not gonna lie. I'm gonna enjoy every second of this.
Yeah, I think it is fascinating to see in terms of character archetypes that we would see today, where, as you said, Megs, like Patroclus is outright described as being like a gentle and kind soul. We see him like weeping when he sees how desperate the situation for the Greeks has become. And then he kills like 30 people named. And I say again, we contain multitudes.
Yeah. And I think he occupies this position for a lot of the war that is like being reasonable so that people have like a reasonable person around Achilles, and he's like able to do that. And I think a lot of why it makes sense, and maybe maybe this is something that Peleus saw early and is like why he made Patroclus' Achilles sort of like right-hand person and companion, is that like Achilles is quite hot-headed and arrogant and Patroclus is quite reasonable. And so for a lot of the war, like it made more sense for him to just advise Achilles. But then we see like he's so capable and has like quite an epic storyline himself. Like he's a very impressive figure in the myth.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. And I think it also, the fact that he has that capacity within him to be just as fierce on the battlefield, but also just as swept up in the fight for like glory. Because it says like, oh, Zeus put it in him to drive forward, even though he should have fallen back. But it also is like he chose to keep going forward instead of falling back, as Achilles had advised. And I think that within him demonstrates why he and Achilles were likely so close, because it's not that he just tolerated the hot-headed Achilles or his stubborn ways. He like genuinely understood them and like empathized, because like, no, I get that. I totally understand how you would come to that, because I can think XYZ would lead me to that as well. Like that peace, that fire, that behavior that exists within me as well.
Yeah.
And I think these two figures are a lot more alike. But perhaps, like you said, like Patroclus has to be the reasonable one, because Achilles has the luxury of being the drama king.
Yeah.
That is not the end of Patroclus, because ghosts get to come and appear in things. Oh, but before we go to the ghost thing, I actually wanted to, because DJ, I got you a present.
Ooh, what'd you get?
Don't you think that Patroclus' death sounds awfully familiar to the death of one Jason Grace?
A little bit.
Just stabbed by a spear
stabbed
twice.
by a spear.
Also Apollo there, but like that.
Twice by the same guy. And here's the thing. Jason was bested, as much as I hate to say it. Cal, I don't remember his whole name. Cal was a god, essentially.
Mm-hmm. But also a god.
At this point. So it is similar, yeah.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that was an intentional comparison to give Jason a specific hero's death. Because he was stabbed and then stabbed again.
Yeah, I think there is like a case that Jason occupies sort of a Patroclus-like role. Not all the time, but like as the books sort of go on, I feel like... Yeah, in like his demeanor.
And then tries to do it for Zeus. Yeah.
Yeah, like
he tries to be reasonable.
Yes, he does. And he's a little bit like a second tier hero. And I don't mean that like in an insulting way, but just like he's kind of happy to be, as the books go on, like supporting.
Yes, anybody like but Percy staff. And Annabeth are probably second tier heroes, as much as it's rough to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. So Patroclus will show up later on to encourage Achilles to finally like do the funeral pyre, give him the burial rites, because he tells him like, I cannot, as we discussed in our underworld episode, he's like, I can't cross the rivers into the underworld because you will not let my body rest.
Yeah. It seems worth mentioning that Achilles just like hangs out with Patroclus's dead body for like an extended amount of time.
See,
until he has killed Hector.
In the first deed denial of Dabda.
Yeah. Yeah.
After
that just he doesn't handle anything
anger,
well.
And then he went right back to denial.
Yeah, you backslide. Yeah, he actually had his mother Thetis preserve Patroclus's body so it would not like start to decompose when he was on the battlefield. So he does it's like one of the last books when he finally like Achilles after this appearance where he's like urging Achilles to bury his body, and then also is like combined our bones together in this golden urn given to you by your mother. It's like, ooh, you also know he's not gonna, because like, Hector is dead at this point. So Patroclus is like, yeah, you're not gonna live for much longer either, my dear. So here's what I need you to do. Please burn my body so I can cross the river because it sucks hanging out here, and you should get your stuff in order too.
Yeah, please. Just please. That's all I gotta say. Please.
My favorite moment of the Iliad is that during the actual burning of Patroclus's body on the pyre, that's like a woman's job. And so what should have happened, like according to customs, would be that the women that they'd kidnapped from Troy and were their slaves would have like built the pyre, burned the body, gathered the ashes, and then the men would have just been there like observing. But Achilles like wouldn't let other people play a role in it, and he actively did all of the like burning and the gathering of the ashes and stuff because he was so protective of Patroclus, which like being a king's son and the greatest warrior at that time, it was like quite demeaning and like emasculating to do that.
See, that's why I'm so glad you're here, Megs, because I didn't know that. I would not have clocked that. I knew I knew Achilles was responsible for it, but I didn't know the that's why it's important to understand culture as well as these myths. They overlap. There is value in all the things.
For sure.
All right, so that's our boy Patroclus. Now we get to Achilles, the drama king. He would give Dionysus a run for his money.
That damn prophecy sent him to war.
That damn prophecy sent him to war. So we covered a lot of Achilles' backstory in our Thetis episode. The son of Thetis and Nereid and the mortal king Peleus. Peleus sent Achilles to be trained by Chiron, as I mentioned earlier, in combat and medical arts. He was raised with his childhood friend Patroclus, and he taught Patroclus all the skills that he had himself learned from Chiron. War breaks out because Eris, because Paris, because Helen, because a bunch of people swore to protect a marriage. Yeah.
Listen to our
little bit of Aphrodite.
Aphrodite, I'm so sorry. I did forget because Eris, because Aphrodite, because Paris, because Helen's dad. This is actually not Helen's fault.
No, shout out Helen.
Accountable.
I love Helen.
Really, it's Eris because Zeus, because Paris, because Aphrodite, because Helen, because a bunch of people.
You know what? True. Well, yeah.
You gotta keep
Helen's
Zeus in
dad.
there.
Oh yeah,
You gotta
Zeus.
keep
Because
Zeus in that
always right. Because Eris. Because
gave it to Zeus.
Because Paris. And Paris, Zeus was like, Paris will do it.
Gave it to Aphrodite, who then got Helen, who was already sworn to a bunch of people.
Yes, a bunch of people who swore they were going to protect this woman's marriage. And then, of course, this is the one girl that Aphrodite was like, yeah, Paris, you can have her.
We should also blame Odysseus a little bit, because that was his idea.
I didn't know it was Odysseus' idea.
It was Odysseus' idea to stop a war. I don't know if we should blame Odysseus for this. I don't think he saw that happen.
He was like, I really want to marry your cousin. So I think everyone else should make an oath about this other woman so that I can marry your cousin.
I don't.
Yeah, he'd already decided. He's like, I know I'm not going to get Helen. I really like Penelope, though.
Yeah.
So I think
Penelope.
Shout out Penelope.
Clear this up so I can shout out Penelope. Always shout out Penelope. Okay, so Thetis knows, okay, there's a prophecy. My son will either live a bright but short life or a long, quiet one. I prefer the latter. So this is not something that comes in the Iliad. A lot of these, like, anything that's not within the, like, that couple of weeks in the Iliad comes from other sources. So post-Homeric poets would claim that to keep Achilles out of the war, Thetis disguised him as a woman and sent him to the court of Lycomedes, who was the king of Skyros. There, Achilles also had 2 sons with Lycomedes' daughter. This is not part of the story, but I did feel that we need to just mention that he was there for a while. War is everyone's getting gathered. Odysseus has now been dragged into this, and he's like, well, if I have to be in this, Achilles has to be in this. And Aesir also...
So
Aesir
petty.
So petty. Like, Odysseus tried really hard not to have to get involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, if I have to, everyone has to. Also,
if I gotta go, I need my buddy over there. He is killer at this shit.
He's like, I need the guy who probably won't let us all get killed.
Yeah, right. I would like to go home to my wife and kid.
the winner.
In 20 years.
Yeah. But actually, for real, because Aesir did tell Odysseus that the Greeks could not win the war without Achilles' aid. So Odysseus goes to Lycomedes' court in disguise because it's Odysseus. He loves a costume.
Yeah, he loves it.
He loves the drama.
He shows up as a peddler, selling fine goods, jewelry, dresses, what have you. All the ladies of the court are like, hell yeah, fineries. But Achilles looks over and he only shows interest in like the one sword and shield set. And that's why Odysseus is like, gotcha, motherfucker. There he is. What lady would like to have a sword and shield? That's crazy. What are you, Hercules' wife who was trained in the arts of chariot and combat? No. Alternatively, Odysseus rolls up to the court and then sounds a warning trumpet of an impending attack. And while all the ladies of the court like go to safety, Achilles like springs into action, ready to defend the court because he was trained by Chiron. And Odysseus is like, "Got you."
Either way, it's so funny.
It's so funny, like because it is so funny. It is one of the funniest stories I think we've talked about because Odysseus.
Because Achilles just like goes from spending presumably multiple years cross-dressing in a dance troupe, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then Odysseus comes in like 10, 15 minutes, is like, all right, fucker, like we have to go to war now. You're a prince, you can't not go.
You can't not go. If I have to go, you have to go. They go to war. We smash cut to the beginning of the Iliad, which opens with, Megs, do you want to explain why Achilles has beef with Agamemnon? I feel like you could bring the right eye to this situation for us.
Okay, so this is like just true of war in general. Women get fucked over. So basically, as they siege Troy, the first thing they do is they sack cities along the exterior. So rich people are inside the wall, poor folks are outside of the wall. Think of modern day America and whose homes are safe and whose homes are not. And they just like pillage and murder and assault and kidnap people. Like, it's horrible. It doesn't do them any good, really. They're just like men all gathered together being violent. So they start kidnapping women. Basically, Agamemnon is the king, like he's in charge of everybody, but Achilles is the greatest warrior. So there's a lot of dispute and politics about who gets what when they pillage things, meaning slaves and like treasure. And so there's this woman named Briseis who Achilles like wants on behalf of Patroclus, presumably. And even though Agamemnon kind of should have had, like, quote-unquote dibs on her, like, she goes to Achilles because Achilles has to be appeased, And then at some point, Agamemnon, like, refuses that and sort of takes her back. And this is when Achilles says, fine, bitch, I won't fight for you. If you're going to disrespect me by taking one of the women that I enslaved, then I'm just going to sit here and let you all die.
Yeah. I believe it was because Agamemnon had a woman who was the daughter of a priest of Apollo. And her
There's the
father
chariot.
came up. Yeah. Her father came up and was like, I want my daughter back. I will give you all this treasure for her. And at first Agamemnon like blows him off, and then Apollo gets involved. And so there's a plague in all of the Greek encampment. So then they finally like, okay, give him her daughter back so Apollo will leave us alone. Because now we're all dying of plague because war. So he does, but now Agamemnon's salty. He's like, well, I had to give up one of my enslaved women, so I'm going to take Briareus from Achilles. And thus we have Achilles being like, fuck you. I'm going to sit right here and do nothing, and you literally can't make me.
Yeah, wild behavior all around.
At first, Agamemnon's like, fine, he doesn't want to fight. I don't care. We can do it without him. Very quickly learns, no, you can't. So sends embassies featuring the likes of Odysseus to talk to Achilles. And he's like, okay, hey, he'll give Briareus back. And like lots of treasure. You'll also get extra treasure. You just need to come and fight again. And Achilles is like, no, I want a public apology. And Agamemnon's like, fuck you. Because pride. So things go from bad to worse. And as we discussed earlier, all of this just end in Patroclus dying.
Mm-hmm.
And Achilles has immense grief over this. Just the absolute, like, grief. Yes, to be expected, but the description of Achilles' grief and what he says is just cutting. I will do another reading. Achilles has just been informed of Patroclus' death at the hands of Hector. At this, a black cloud of despair engulfed Achilles. With both hands, he scooped up fistfuls of soot and dust and poured it on his head, and rubbed the dirt across his handsome face. Black ashes settled on his scented tunic. He stretched his whole long body in the dust and lay there. With both hands, he tore his hair. The women whom Achilles and Patroclus had captured and enslaved were struck by grief. They screamed and wailed and ran outside, surrounding the warrior Achilles. With their fists, they pounded on their breasts, limbs weak with shock. Patroclus was sobbing, shedding tears, and holding tightly to Achilles' hands so that he could not use an iron knife to slit his throat. Achilles groaned, heartbroken. He howled in agony. His goddess mother heard him from where she sat beside her father, down in the hollow depths, and keened for him. Sorry. And then that actually transitions into Thetis being like with all of her sisters and being like, wow, my son has just suffered immense grief. And also, I know for a fact he's going to die soon now. As we said earlier, now he will face Hector. Hector will die and my son will die. And
yeah.
Cool.
Love
That's just my life, I guess.
I don't know if you all talked about this on the Thetis episode, but I think Thetis and Achilles' relationship is so, like, deeply interesting because I think she could be seen really easily as, like, a very cruel figure who sort of drives Achilles towards his own death. But really, like, Thetis was assaulted by Achilles' biological father, like, and she had no choice in the matter of marrying him either. And so Achilles was, like, truly all she had. And so it's very interesting to think about, like, whatever glory or life he has is her legacy. Because what should have been her legacy was marrying a Olympian, but because of a prophecy about her, like, that was taken away. And so then she's, like, just left with this boy who ends up dying very, very young.
Yeah, no, the original, I think I called that episode Thetis Double Dip the Baby, because funny. And it's something we said. But the original name of the episode was Thetis is a Great Mom.
Yeah.
Mom of the Year.
Sometimes maybe you feel like Thetis, sometimes you just gotta let your kid make his mistakes, like you helping him, like when he's like, make the Greeks lose so Agamemnon feels bad, and she's like, all right, hon, that's what you want, but she also was able to do that and tell him, just don't leave until I get back, and like keep him off the battlefield longer. But I had not considered how her legacy, like Achilles is her legacy, but how her legacy was supposed to be marrying an Olympian like her sister Amphitrite and being like queen of one of these realms. And because Prometheus rolled up with a prophecy,
Damn it.
DJ had a great point where they're like, they should have just let her marry like Hephaestus or some other god so they could get like an upgraded blacksmith god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would have been
They
awesome.
were really afraid of patricide in that family, though.
That's, well, you know.
There's a history of
past
patricide.
2
It runs through the blood.
generations.
Their number one concern was truly like,
Yeah.
well, any son could kill me.
Oh, you
Yep,
know.
can't have that. So, yeah, for real. I love Thetis and think she should be in more things.
Same.
Fair enough.
I
And she
think
was
she's
like
great.
such a prominent god for the Greeks. She had a massive following, which is so cool.
Mhm.
And my theory is that that's why the stories about her started getting so misogynistic, because like they were upset about her like real cultural power. But
And they just needed to
yeah,
smear her reputation to get people to stop giving her cultural power.
yeah,
So Thetis goes to Achilles and tries to comfort him. And he's like, hey, you prayed to Zeus for the ships to be safe, and they're safe. And swift-footed Lord Achilles, groaning, answered, yes, mother, Zeus has granted me that prayer. But what good to me is any of it? My friend Patroclus, whom I loved, is dead. I loved him more than any other comrade. I loved him like my head, my life, myself. I lost him, killed him. Hector slaughtered him and stripped from him the marvelous magic armor, lovely gifts the gods gave Peleus, the day they lind you an immortal goddess into a mortal's bed. If only you had stayed among the deathless gods under the sea, and Peleus had taken a mortal woman as his wife. Your marriage brought never-ending sorrow to your heart for your dead child, whom you will never welcome home again, because my heart forbids me to live or be with people anymore, unless my spear can strike down Hector first, and take away his life and make him pay, because he killed and looted my Patroclus. Just two guys being bros.
Okay, so on that, I would argue
I
a
love
majority.
DJ.
Here's the thing: a majority of that is just two guys being bros, especially if comrade in arms. I'm certain if you ask any military guy, would you die for this guy? Of course, they would always answer, and they'd be saddened immensely. It's to the
Yes.
point of he wanted to slit his throat. I loved him
Yeah.
more than any of my other comrades.
Loved him
And
like
just-
my head, my heart,
yeah.
my life, myself. Yeah.
Like those,
Yeah.
it's clearly gay, right?
I think it's the
Like,
refusing to not live
That's what makes
anymore.
it gay.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
makes it gay. But if I had immense godlike powers and somebody killed Julio, my best friend, I would want to put their head on a pike and run it through their city, right? Like,
Yeah. I love my friends a lot. I just wouldn't stop living if something happened to
Yeah.
them. And that feels
That's-
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
clear line. Yeah.
There's definitely a line. And also the healthiness of these things
Yeah.
in general.
Which
So-
nobody should make you want to stop living. But if
Yeah,
they
yeah,
do,
yeah.
you
That's-
had
that's
to
it.
be in love with them.
yes, there is a little bit
had
more.
to been little non-platonic love.
Yeah.
Yes. If their absence causes you that level of grief, maybe.
If
It's
you
not
literally go to your
platonic.
mom and you're like, sorry, mom, you're not going to see your kid again because this bitch is not going to keep living.
I'm going to kill Hector, and I know I'm going to die shortly after that. No regrets. Not a one. A regret is maybe letting Patroclus take my armor, but that's fine.
It was your direct inaction, Achilles, that led to Patroclus's death.
That's the thing. It's not even just Patroclus died on the battlefield. Like, if they'd been fighting side by side,
his
if Patroclus
inaction.
had been like, I'm going to go fight, that would soften more. But it's Achilles' in action, and his asking Thetis to tell Zeus to let the Trojans have a one-up to threaten the ships. Like, it's he and his pride and arrogance against Agamemnon for the slights is what has led to Patroclus dying. And so Achilles is also faced with, like, he says, like, in the thing, like, I slaughtered him. Like, Hector killed him, but I slaughtered my Patroclus because of my choices. It led directly to this. And there's this just pain.
Yeah, I think that that's a very good example of like the consequence of the choice Achilles made when he did go to war. Because in a lot of ways, Achilles chose the short life full of glory versus the long, boring one. And that is sort of the culmination of that choice is the love of his life was killed because of him and because he wanted the glory. And so like you do sort of see that price for hubris that's like so prominent in myth.
We also have, as you mentioned earlier, Achilles is like put off killing Patroclus because he knows, not Patroclus, Hector, because he knows after Hector dies, I will die. And so it's also, if you had faced Hector 10 years ago, maybe you would have died then, but Patroclus would live to see the end of this war.
Yeah.
And it's immensely tragic. Hey, y'all, the Iliad is really good and really sad.
So sad.
Thank you, Emily Wilson, for translating it in a way that actually makes me want to read the damn thing.
Yeah, for real.
So, Achilles gets new armor created by Hephaestus, given to him by his mother, returns to the battlefield, fights a bunch of people, including a river. We discussed this.
So cool.
At this point, I do want to note that Achilles is not immortal in the Iliad.
No.
The story
He's
of Thetis
invulnerable.
attempting... No, he's not invulnerable either. No, he's that magical plot. I mean, he's got plot armor to be sure.
Yeah.
But that magical burned away years mortality, dipped in the river Styx, like that was something that was introduced in later myths. The Achilleid, which was written during the 1st century AD, is one of the first times you're introduced to Thetis trying to make Achilles invulnerable. In fact, when he fights by the Scamander River, is like Homer notes of him, he's getting injured and wounded and continues to fight.
It's probably, again, like, if you get your Achilles sliced, that's it for you. Like, in a battlefield like that, you are down. You cannot move that leg anymore.
Oh, yeah,
like,
for
you
real.
do not have function over your foot, and it's just...
Yeah, but Achilles doesn't die on the battlefield. But we'll get to that a little later. For now, he goes to Hector, duels him, and eventually Hector very realizes he's like, I'm not going to leave this battle. This is book 22, Race to the Death. And so Hector just says, like, I beg by your life, your knees, your parents, do not let dogs devour me by your ships. Accept the bronze and gold, the lavish gifts my noble parents will provide you with, and give my body back. Let me go home so that the Trojan men and Trojan wives grant me my due in death, a funeral pile. Basically, Hector's like, I know you're going to kill me. Just take my... basically, like, let me have my burial rights. Let my family have my body.
And Achilles is like, no.
No. Swift-footed
Absolutely
Lord Achilles
not.
scowled and said, Dog, do not beg or speak of knees or parents. If I had will and heart to do it, I would carve up your flesh and eat it raw for the abominations you have done to me. No one can save your body from my dogs, not even if they bring me a ransom 10 times or 20 times the usual rate and weigh it out and promise me even more.
Could you imagine just speaking like that? Like somebody says something to you and that's how you respond?
Yeah.
Insane.
Just the drama of it. Just
Gotta love it.
the rage. Even in his rage and grief, Achilles is still a drama king.
Oh, so good.
So, kills Hector, drags his body around the city. As we covered this in our Thetis episode, because this is the point where the gods are like, oh, yeah, kill Hector, whatever. But it's the desecrating of the body, and they're refusing to give it back. Like,
bro. Like,
that's what, so, like,
Everyone's like, too far.
yeah. So Zeus calls up Thetis and is like, you need to control your son. Thetis, who is already mourning Achilles because he's going to die soon.
Yeah, he's about
She
to
goes
die.
and is like, you need to give Hector's body back. Because at this point, Achilles after being visited by the shade of Patroclus, had the funeral pyre, as Megs discussed, did all that work himself, hosted funeral games in honor of his friend.
Just this whole time, his chariot's parked in the parking lot, and Hector's body is just tied up like just married cans to the back of it.
Basically, yeah.
Literally, yes.
He does the funeral pile for Patroclus, refuses to do it for Hector's body. Basically is like, I'm going to let my dogs eat him. And Aphrodite herself is keeping the dogs away from Hector's body. So eventually, Achilles
Aphrodite's like,
agrees.
he's really hot. We can't just let dogs eat him. We have to bury him.
We have to bury him, please. To be fair, also, Aphrodite's actively sided with the Trojans here. So
Yeah.
the
She's
least
got
she can do.
many motives.
Yeah, she's got a lot going on. And so, at Thetis' urging, Achilles does give Hector's body back. And the Iliad actually ends with Hector's funeral pyre.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to discuss the Iliad and a whole episode later. And questions of like, but we all know Achilles dies because of his Meshuggah heel. So, what? And we'll cover the what and the why later. But So Achilles' death, but we know it's going to happen because we know the prophecy about Hector dying. When Hector is slain, he predicts that Paris and Apollo will end Achilles. The Shade of Patroclus infers that Achilles' death is coming soon when he asks for their ashes to be buried together. And in the Odyssey, Achilles is dead, and Odysseus meets him in the underworld, and Agamemnon describes Achilles' funeral to him. But the question is, how did he die?
The layman's myth is an arrow to the heel.
Yeah.
By Paris, who didn't pull his weight in the whole fucking war.
The whole war! You started this! Where have you been?
Right. Okay. So, didn't pull his weight to the whole war. And here's, like, the graph of, like, how much Paris contributed towards the victory, right? Boom! Right there. He got that shot, right? Just one thing, and that victory was assured. I mean, it wasn't, but
Hera hated them, so no, you are never going to win.
Did not. But Achilles, that's a morale boost, dude. We got it. Let's go.
Everyone is finally not mad at Paris after 10 years of hating Paris.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. He did.
Everyone's holding him on his shoulders. Hip hip hurrah! Oh, he's a jolly good fellow and whatnot.
We talk about the Odyssey and the Iliad a lot. But there are actually just 2 epics in what was called the epic cycles, where there was like 12 of these major poems that like every educated Greek knew about. And even just like every Greek knew about because they were the basis of all of, well, I say Greek. Time is funny with these stories.
Mediterranean era
of these
people.
Thousands, like 700 years we talk about when we talk about these stories. Everyone knew these stories, basically. But we only have like these 2 and fragments and references to the others. So we have Achilles' death from those pieces. There's one version where I mentioned the guy that kept Achilles from slitting his throat. This guy dies. Bummer. He became very close to Achilles after Patroclus' death. He dies. Achilles goes on a rampage, kills the guy that kills him, and then from atop the wall, Paris shoots an arrow and is able to kill Achilles, the arrow being guided by Apollo.
So he didn't even do it himself.
Didn't he got a god's help? Just like when they killed Patroclus, had to get a god's help to do it.
There's nothing wrong with getting a god's help, everybody. Percy had to get a god's help to kill 2-bodied bastard.
That's
Remember
true.
that.
He did phone up Artemis and Apollo and hoped one of them would listen.
Darien. That's the guy's name.
Darien, that's right. He's what's his face's boyfriend?
Yeah, not a minotaur, but a weird centaur.
Something. I don't remember that guy. Who's doing all the ambrosia farming. Those stories are really popular. This is from another, what was this one called? The Aethiopis is what I could gather, like this is that lost poem, that lost epic where this story would have been contained. I couldn't tell whether it was supposed to be like before the Iliad, like written wise afterwards, because that just feels like a really weird rehash to have the Patroclus thing happen all over again, but with a different guy. Mm-hmm. But clearly they were really close because they note that his bones are also in that urn, but like separate from Achilles and Patroclus' ashes that were actually mixed together.
Achilles and Patroclus' ashes mixed together. They took that jar, put them both in and shook it, right? And then they dropped the guy's bones in.
Basically, yeah, he's just on the top. This story also features Ajax taking Achilles' body back, which was popular on a bunch of Greek vases at the time.
Nice.
I like Ajax.
Ajax too.
Generally. I think he's cool. I actually also like Hector generally. Maybe that's a hot take, but...
Ooh.
No, I've actually heard that one before too.
Yeah, he's like pretty cool.
I played a game that was, you played as Achilles and one of the first things you do is kill Hector.
Oh.
And I told my friend about it. I was like, what? No, don't kill Hector. I mean, technically it's true to how it goes because you get the option to like if you want to kill him or not. I'm like, yeah, let's kill this guy. He's a boss. I don't know him. This is war.
This is war, yeah. Now, other poets would give us the story of Polyxena, who was the youngest daughter of King Priam of Troy and his wife Hecuba, making her the sister of Paris. And so her story varies greatly depending on who's telling it. You know, we get that a lot. But what we're going to talk about today in association to Achilles is that in order to end the war, they're like, okay, well, Polyxena will marry Achilles. And Paris will return Helen and will end the war. this will be great. Well, Paris is like, but I don't want to give Helen back. So he ambushes the wedding and shoots Achilles in the heel with a poisoned arrow. Again, guided by Apollo. So it's not like the idea like, oh, the heel was the one vulnerable spot, because that shouldn't have really killed him if they weren't on the battlefield. But if it's poisoned because you're Paris and you're a bitch.
And it's also ancient Greece, poison is almost a sure thing.
From Apollo, yeah.
Also, not the first of Achilles' weddings that end with one of the people getting married dying, so that the ceremony couldn't be complete.
DJ, it is 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I recognize this was your bad. I wanted just to acknowledge, so it wasn't like his voice just disappeared. So go to sleep. I'm actually bummed out because now we're going to talk about the relationship, and I know you have a lot of fun insight into that. But I'm glad you said your piece earlier.
It's just that simple fact that the outside actions taken by Achilles, I would argue, is not what makes their relationship gay. At the very least, not what makes it seem gay. It's his feelings, his words. And
that's what it truly...
Yeah. It's like...
It's almost as if your actions are not the thing that makes your identity. It is how you feel within your soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have a wonderful night. Thank you so much, Megs, for joining us. And thank you so much for signing out for me.
Did you want to remind everybody to go to our Patreon?
Patreon.com/Muses of Mythology. You better be there or be square, motherfuckers. Let me tell you, we got some beautiful things up there. We got the 12 Days of Musemas. It's coming back. You better be ready. We're all excited about it. Patreon.com/Muses of Mythology. Good night.
Sleep well, D. I'd like to introduce my guest co-host, Megs.
Yeah. Happy to be here filling in.
I want to talk about... I mean, we clearly have already been very open of our interpretation of Achilles and Patroclus. It's like, you can't say this was purely platonic.
No, they were having sex.
Absolutely.
In that tent.
They were literally playing music in the tent together.
And they were in love.
So, we'll have to acknowledge that, like, Homer in the Iliad does not explicitly state, like, define the nature of the relationship as being strictly platonic, romantic, or sexual, but nor does he, like, outright rule out any interpretation.
I would argue that that's because, like, sexual identity didn't exist in ancient Greece, so there wouldn't have been a way to define it, because straightness didn't get identified until queerness had been, and that was when it was, like, being pathologized, like, many, many decades, arguably centuries later. And so, like, you just were yourself, and who you had sex with wasn't, like, or had relations with in any way, wasn't, like, an integral part of your identity the way it is now. And so, like, there wouldn't have been language for Homer to be like, boyfriend. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's also in that nature, like, the audience of the time, like, contemporary audiences would have recognized what they were supposed to interpret from their relationship. And then all that's it. Like, the writers of antiquity were also having this exact conversation. Like, the idea of readers, like, reading the Iliad, listening to the Iliad, and then being like, what is the nature of this relationship exactly? That's not something we just started doing because Tumblr, right? Like, Madeline Miller didn't invent this.
No.
This has been going on for a while. A quick vocab, because a lot of, like, these writers were using, like, to just, like, suggest or define the nature of the relationship. So I feel like I wanted, like, here's a quick vocab using some terms from Athens. As Megs mentioned earlier, it was considered societally, like, common for an older man and a younger boy.
I mean, it was, like, super gross and not acceptable. Yeah, this is not, like, a positive thing.
This would not be cool. Yeah, no, this is not, no. But this was the setup, and essentially what was it was Paiderastia? Pediastera?
Yeah, I'm not great with pronunciations, but that sounds good to me.
Those are the sounds that the letters make in that order. Yeah. So, it was defined as a political, intellectual, and sometimes sexual relationship. Its ideal structure consisted of an older Orestes, who was the lover and the protector, and the younger Eromenos, the beloved.
Which also sort of relates to the fact that in ancient Greece, often a good education for young boys was done by like a teacher, and then they would like literally meet in the woods and like talk for hours. But also the teacher would have sex with the students. That was super normal. And Socrates was notable because he was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have sex with our students. And that was like so out there that was like the Socratic method of teaching for a long time. So like, yeah, these like age gap power dynamics were really normalized between men and boys.
Yeah. Like we're saying they were normalized in Athens. We are not saying right now that this was cool and probably okay and that everyone was like emotionally healthy and well regulated as a result.
Or that this is like positive queer representation. Like ancient Greece sometimes gets like credit for being super gay, and that's not really true. Like powerful men were allowed to have sex with boys, and prepubescent boys, if they were rich, were allowed to have sex with each other, and that's not gay rights.
Yeah, no, but this was the lens that these writers were viewing Achilles and Patroclus through.
Yeah.
So I have team definitely gay and team strictly platonic. So, and we have a couple I've just lined these ancient writers up because I thought it is really interesting that this conversation is very, very old. First up, we've got a playwright because I love talking about our playwrights. Aeschylus, sure, why not? Who wrote the lost tragedy, the Myrmidons. And this one, he defined Achilles as the role of the protector and Patroclus as the beloved. And those, I'm just going to use those terms because I'm not going to try to say the Greek words over and over again. Y'all don't like hearing me struggle. I don't like struggling. It's not fun for me. You know what I meant. We said them earlier.
Yeah.
In the surviving fragments of the play, Achilles speaks of the reverent company of Patroclus' thighs and how Patroclus was ungrateful for many kisses. So.
Yeah.
We've got Pindar, who is a poet, who compared the adolescent boxer Hagesimus, and his stranger Alasus to Patroclus and Achilles in his poem The Olympian. And he also compares the boxer to Zeus's lover Ganymede. So, vibes there. We can definitely tell where this gentleman stood in the interpretation. Plato himself got a hand on the ball in his symposium, which was written circa like 385 BC. Again, about 300, 400 years after the Iliad. Just really want to cement time in these conversations because it's perplexing. The speaker holds up Achilles and Patroclus as divinely approved lovers. And also says that earlier playwright got their relationship totally wrong and it absolutely should have been flipped. With Patroclus as the protector and Achilles as the beloved.
Yeah, there's a lot of interpretations of like that writing of Plato, and some people are like, Plato's just making the argument that Achilles is a bottom, which I think is like funny just because like that's not really outlandish for like Greek philosophers of the time. Like that's so in their wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. It's super fun when you actually when you're younger and you're learning about like Greek philosophers, it's all very stodgy and very high and mighty ivory columns and what have you. And then you grow up, and if you continue to do this thing we do and learn more about them, you're like, these fools, they were wild.
They were so wild, and they were just allowed to like
Shakespeare.
Think. Yeah, exactly.
Last one I want to talk about is Achilles. I'm so sorry. And basically he says the same thing, and it's like, hey, listen, although Homer didn't like explicitly say it, an educated man could read between the lines.
Yeah.
Because this was the way the culture was. Over in Team Platonic, hilarious that Plato's not over here, we have Socrates. Megs? Perhaps surprising no one.
No, Socrates continues to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. To quote, Homer pictures us Achilles looking upon Patroclus not as the object of his passion, but as a comrade, and in this spirit signally avenging his death. Which, okay.
Socrates was in the trenches of internalized homophobia, I think, and that's really where this is coming from.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. We've got a contemporary of Plato, who is Xenophon, who in his own symposium had Socrates arguing that Achilles and Patroclus were merely chaste and devoted comrades. And lastly on our lineup, I've got Pseudo-Apollodorus, who specifically frames Patroclus as a brother-like figure to Achilles. Which, fine, go off, man.
That's the funniest, argument against queerness that, happens in pop culture is no, they were, brothers.
Yeah. No, they were, what is Sailor Moon? No. They're cousins.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah. I want to just give us a bonus. And this bonus is Alexander the Great.
Yes.
Megs, would you like to take this for a minute and tell us why Alexander the Great is our bonus here?
Alexander the Great basically wrote fan fiction about Achilles and Patroclus. He was really enamored by their relationship and just, loved them and, very much saw them as lovers.
Yeah, and I think that's also, maybe loved them because he perhaps saw himself and his BFF in them, because he was very close with his childhood companion, cavalry commander Hephaestion. And when they passed through Troy, they did, made a point to stop at the sacred tomb to Achilles and Patroclus and pay honors to them, with Alexander honoring Achilles specifically, and Hephaestion honoring Patroclus, which, hey, Alex, maybe that wasn't the best plan if you didn't want your buddy to die, because when Hephaestion died, Alexander was not okay.
No. Yeah, it's so interesting that Achilles and Patroclus sort of became, gay patron saints. And, they still sort of operate that role, but, even for someone like Alexander the Great.
Mm-hmm. Their influence was felt so much so. Alexander had already been, named by the priest as, having divine status. And after Hephaestion died, he wrote the priest and was like, I want you to give him divine status as well. I'm like, we can't do that. We can make him a divine hero, though. And Alexander died not long after this. So, death by heartbreak.
Yeah.
It's not a new invention. So, listen, this conversation was happening for a long time. And I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong stance to have based on the interpretation, because I think the final thing is just the fact that these two figures in the Iliad had such a deep bond. This bond was so deep that the other relationships they had with other people were defined and described based on where it stood with their relationship to others. Other characters are introduced as being yes, Achilles cared for him, only second to Patroclus. You're supposed to understand that this person is so important because they're almost as important as this other character is. Now, I say all that because I do genuinely believe it, and I think if you're writing a story and trying to interpret this, I think it's how it resonates most with the creator and the storyteller of what they see in that relationship and what would inspire them themselves to respond as Achilles does, respond as Patroclus does. And so I'm not going to fault anyone who does read the Iliad or listen or totally disagrees with Meg and I and are just no, I think this was platonic. I think this was a brother relationship. That's fine. I think it's just these characters loved each other deeply, and that is what is, I feel inherently important. Unless you're the medieval Christians who are just suppressing the queer shit on purpose, you're wrong. They're all wrong. That's if we're just hiding away the gay, then it's wrong. That's my stance on this. If you're I don't see it, okay. If you're I refuse to see it, no.
I think it's important to keep in mind that even though some of who we presume to be Homer's work is written down, and so it has this sort of canon-like status, that's not how Greek story functioned. And every single bard told the story differently. And so really, truly, there's no right or wrong. I think what we can call wrong is homophobia. And so if you, for some reason, find yourself to be triggered by people reading Achilles and Patroclus as queer, then that's something for you to figure out. But
you need to reflect on that. Don't at me. I don't care. Don't at Megs either. They're busy. They're in grad school. They don't have time for you.
And I'll be pretty mean, so you probably don't want to do that, to be honest with you.
That's true.
My digital footprint is already a mess, so I have no fear.
Yeah.
So don't be homophobic, but all interpretations are valid, and that shouldn't be that hard to figure out, folks.
Yeah, exactly. That's that's Achilles and Patroclus.
Yeah.
I think.
Lot
I feel
there.
very comfortable. Yeah. I think when we talk like earlier, like how, like you said, like the Homeric, these stories are so in flux because what we have is not what it was. Even when we have translations that we view as like being very like well done, like I will sing the praises of Emily Wilson's work all the time. And even then I will be acutely aware that this is not what an ancient person would have been hearing in 700 BC or whenever.
Yeah.
So even when we have the ancients trying to interpret like all the ones we just listed, they're still trying to interpret it based off their own cultural lenses. Like, as you said at the top, Megs, like we interpret like Patroclus and Achilles in like our understanding of like Western queerness, which was just not it. And that's just us trying to continue to have a living relationship with these characters and the texts.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to be purists about it. I think it's like helpful context to know that like the Greeks didn't really separate out different types of relationships or like label people's identities the way that we do. But like if that's how you want to relate to the text is like be like Achilles was bi, then fucking do that. There's like you're not causing any harm.
Yeah.
But you just can't be like precious about your interpretations of a text that was so unstable.
Yeah. Ooh, unstable is such a good way to describe it. Yeah. I know there is like accusation easy of being like, oh, you are reading too much into it, or like you're celebrating Achilles and Patroclus too much and elevating them. I think it's sometimes, yeah, if you're like, these are my like queer icons and we ignore that Achilles and Patroclus were actively like enslaving women. I mean, let's talk about grappling with that. But at the same time, I think it's, as I mentioned, like medieval Christians suppressing it. Rick Riordan, who's an author that we enjoy his work quite a lot, retelling this story and framing it as they were really good friends.
Best buds.
Yeah, the acute and intentional, not to say Rick like did this on purpose of like stripping away the queerness, but like, I don't know, man. But the fact that a lot of queerness in ancient text is or has historically been stripped away and suppressed and rewritten to hide it. And so I think it's also totally valid to cling to it and celebrate it and uphold it, because there was a really long time where it was basically forbidden knowledge. You weren't allowed to know that Achilles says he loves Patroclus more than anybody else.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, they're fictional characters, and so you're not causing any like real world harm by participating in their story. That's different than like,
yes,
you know, like supporting a person who's causing in real life harm in some way. And like more Greek context, the hero is kind of an interesting word to use. Like the Greeks were telling stories about fucked up people, including their gods, like because they were like messy folks who were there for the drama.
Yes.
So yeah, like it's not like a moral tale in the same way that most Western media is that we consume today. So yeah, like nobody really wants you to like walk away rooting for Achilles or Patroclus as like good people or upstanding heroes, but it's like they're human and we're human, and so we get invested in like thinking about them.
Yeah, like I don't know, rereading the part where Patroclus dies, like that gets me. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is my new favorite. And
yeah.
It's like, take it back. Fictional character, it's okay, but take it back. But speaking of our like Western storytelling and the influences in pop culture, do you want to talk about Song of Achilles?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, when I say, do you want to talk, I mean, do you want to tell me about Song of Achilles?
Oh, yeah.
Despite my many, many promises, guess who never actually read it?
I will say I do recommend it.
No, I want to read it. Here's the thing. I dramatically underestimated how long the library waitlist for the book would be. I'm on the audio one and I'm on the e one. And
yeah.
My
it's a
bad.
Popular one, for sure. Song of Achilles has transcended the level of popularity where it's now cool to hate it. So I will warn anybody who goes on the internet and is like, why in the past, like, I don't know, 3 years has this book gotten so much hate? The answer is people love an individuality complex. So if anything gets
it's like
too
the Titanic.
popular... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's a very well-written novel. Madeline Miller is like a pretty pretty decent scholar, so it's well researched and everything. And then it really follows the story of Achilles and Patroclus' relationship from childhood, so you see them as peers. And then I think what the book does well is it gives a sense of tragedy that they were about 19 years old when they went to Troy and under 30 when they died. And what's so heartbreaking about that is that they weren't equipped to make a good decision. You know, like at 19, Achilles can conceptualize why living like a long, happy life would be better than glory. And it's really like tragic to see basically a kid whose like brain literally hadn't been fully developed put himself in such a bad position. Yeah, but it's very well written. It's a good like fucked up romance, like because those stories are appealing. Like that's why we read Wuthering Heights.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like not to like root for or want a relationship like that yourself. You should probably want a relationship that doesn't result in you both dying in your late 20s. But
yeah.
I think it's really beautiful. I think it's interesting to watch like successful women get torn down because it's gonna continue to happen. But like Madeline Miller's a very good writer.
Yeah. I own Circe. Have I read it? No. I will. I'm going to. I want to. I genuinely want to. I have.
It'll be there when you have time.
Thank you, Megs. Thank you for making me feel so much better.
Yeah.
Hey, is Theseus a villain in Song of Achilles?
I wouldn't say there are villains in Song of Achilles. I don't think it's intended to be read that way. I think Theseus is a woman who desperately wants something back out of life and out of eternity because she's going to live forever. What you have to understand when reading Song of Achilles is that the homophobia in the book is not unreasonable to like for that time period, because Achilles was going to be king of like a fairly important Grecian island, and he was going to need to have a wife, and he was going to need to stop publicly basically having sex with a man at some point, right? Like the relationship with Patroclus was meant to be grown out of when he was like around women, and the war sort of delays that. But Theseus grows sort of more and more antagonistic towards Patroclus because Patroclus threatens Achilles' reputation.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. So that's really interesting. Just in the that idea of like that close camaraderie was meant to be grown out of, and then the war like that prolongs it obviously in Song of Achilles, but in the Iliad as well.
Yeah,
that could be interpreted as this relationship should not be this close and would not have been if it hadn't been for this war.
Yeah, they would have had to answer more questions, right? Because like at some point, Patroclus was supposed to move out of Achilles' room, and Achilles was supposed to take a wife. Because they went to war at the age that they did, they could share a tent for what ended up being the rest of their lives. But, like, it really prolonged that adolescent sort of, like, pseudo-romance, pseudo-sexual relationship that Achilles was allowed to have for now until he became seriously interested in a wife.
I gotta read that book.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. Yeah, and also, like, shout out Madeline Miller, bisexual icon.
Oh, I didn't know that about her. Cool.
Yeah, she like recently came out on Instagram, and that's exciting.
Oh, good for her. You know what? Just good for her. I'm glad she feels comfortable in her existence to be able to be that and do that for herself. I bet that feels so good.
Me too.
Did you read The Silence of the Girls?
No, I haven't. And I can't decide if I want to. I've read like mixed reviews on it. Have you?
Interesting. Okay. I have that on the list specifically because I was like, Megs has probably read this.
Oh, no,
it's about the women of the Iliad, and Achilles is in it, and Patroclus is in it. So I was curious as to like that. But yeah, it's also another where I'm like, I am interested, but also very scared of it.
Yeah, I believe that one is a lot less kind to Achilles and Patroclus, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. Yeah. I think like all the angles are important. Yeah, and so it would be a very interesting read, like, because I would say, like, I'm kind of attached to the figures of Achilles and Patroclus. Like, I think of them fondly despite their flaws, and so reading them as, like, villainous would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that we often do, especially when you're a fan of, like, myth and experiencing retelling, when you find, like, a version, a narrative that you really like for a lot of reasons, and the way it portrays these characters you grow very fond of, it becomes uncomfortable and frustrating to see them, like, quote, treated badly or someone got it wrong. But it's like, we know, like, you and I, Megs, and folks who also understand myth and storytelling in this way and experience the way, like, know that there's not wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean they all has to be our favorite thing.
No, it doesn't all feel good.
Like, I'm allowed to like things where Persephone is like fun and optimistic and has a cute flirty relationship with Hades, and not like the ones where it's like, I'm not having fun, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, no, that's so valid. And it is interesting to think about it through a lens of like, you know, people are complex and different people have different experiences of the same person. Like, my mom feels quite differently about me than like the classmates I have who don't really like what I have to say. Like, they're having very different opinions and experiences of me. And so like Patroclus had a very different experience of Achilles than the women that were enslaved in the camp. Yeah, and so I'm definitely open to all interpretations, but I won't ever pretend like Madeline Miller didn't write one of my favorite, where they're like fairly lovable adolescent boys.
Yeah, because I did finally like, okay, I'm just going to read the bio, just read the summary of it. And because I want to be able to like, when Megs is talking about it, I want to be able to at least like respond adequately. And it's noted that Achilles in Song of Achilles takes Briareus specifically to try to protect her from Agamemnon.
Yeah, and that's Patroclus's idea. And Achilles like sort of wouldn't be that thoughtful, which a lot of the inspiration for the book is that Patroclus is kind and that he's really the only Greek man we can point to in myth that was said about, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the women viewed him as kind. So he clearly was not your typical captor. And also he wouldn't have like per se owned any of the women. So he probably did have like some sort of disdain for the practice. Like we can sort of read that into his character. And that is like really leaned into in the novel and creates a very interesting character in Briseis. She's like one of the best characters in the book.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, because when Achilles finds out in the Iliad that Patroclus has died, he's in grief, and it literally notes like all of the women they've enslaved come out and are equally showing grief for this news. So yeah, it shows like Patroclus is a very interesting and distinct kind of character. And I don't know, man, he also rolled up and totally convinced the Trojans he was Achilles for a hot second, so I'm like, yes, I like soft boy. Also, sounds like he could punch a man in the face. Both are excellent in our queer representation.
I also like that he kind of contains multitudes, because I think sometimes because Greek heroes often personify a trait, they can be kind of one note. And Patroclus was never like the main character, so he kind of gets to be 3D.
Yeah, it's almost early on in the Iliad, he almost seems like he is a minor character until all of a sudden he's not anymore. And you're like, oh.
And then he's like, the plot.
The plot hinges around this man's fate. Oh my god, that's actually incredible. Is Patroclus my favorite? He might be.
He's up there for me. I will say my true favorite Greek hero is Penthesilea, who is involved with Achilles because he's who kills her. But
she's the Amazon queen, right?
But they had both just lost a great love. Her sister died and his lover died, and they both came to battle hoping the other would kill them. And Achilles kills Penthesilea. And it's like a great Greek tragic moment. Yeah, but she's super badass.
Yeah, because he's like also kind of worried, like, oh, she might kill me. Also, I feel kind of bad about killing her because I actually respect her a lot.
Yeah.
But I actually don't think I want to die yet. I guess not.
I love to read like a lot into that moment of like they have like deep shared understanding because they're both doing it from like a place of grief.
Yeah, no, she is great. This is weird. It's not modern pop culture, but Achilles is mentioned in Dante's Inferno. He's in like the circle of hell reserved for lust. So think about where you think Dante thought about Achilles and Patroclus.
Dante, I love him.
Really? I have no opinions.
I love that he was just like writing like fan fiction, and it influences how like modern Christians view eternity.
Yes,
because nowhere in the Bible does hell like talk about being like a physical place and like it has nothing to do with fire.
And
but this like gay Italian man like convinced everybody that they were gonna burn for eternity, like without meaning to. That's just so funny.
He was just writing some self-insert fanfic and just this happened. It's, incredibly powerful stuff, Dante.
Yeah.
Well done. Shakespeare also got a hand on the ball briefly in his play Troilus and Cressida. And that first guy is a figure actually from the Iliad. He was also one of Paris' siblings. In some things, there's a story where it's like if he survives to adulthood, then they will win the war. But Achilles does kill him.
Interesting. Because,
Not
like, with
somewhere,
Paris,
but-
it's sort of the opposite, where if Paris lives, like, tragedy will befall them.
Interesting. Someone should have really pushed Paris down a flight of stairs. I think,
know.
in Troy.
They should have.
Hecuba,
If there was ever a time for an abortion.
I believe you would have had it in you to push him down the stairs.
Oh, Hecuba for sure. I can't, they dropped the ball on that one. So sorry to
Mhm.
all of you.
Yep. Anyway, so Troilus is a figure. Cressida isn't. She's a medieval figure that was like kind of put in for stories and like that chivalric romance that the medieval French were like super into. This is where we get a lot of our Lancelot and Guinevere stuff, actually. So this play is about their relationship and about the Trojan War. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because I've never seen it and I probably won't. But so Achilles isn't fighting, and it's really heavily implied that it's because he's just too busy having sex with Patroclus. Because Shakespeare's another one of those figures that we're taught it as kids, and it's dry and boring. And then as an adult, you learn Shakespeare was going off at all angles.
Yeah, that's so funny. I know that Madeline Miller directed a production of that play.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Amazing woman. That makes such sense.
Yeah.
So, shout out to Shakespeare for mayhaps inventing the trope of being too gay to function. Well, probably not inventing it, but it's there.
A very prominent early use, though.
I love mentioning Hercules, the animated series, because I like Disney's Hercules very much. And also the existence of the animated series as being just completely non-canon and compliant with the movie delights me as a storytelling element to no end.
Yeah.
So Achilles is in that. He didn't die in Troy. He just had a bad heel, got injured, is like a washed out fighter. And Hades and his quest to fuck with Hercules all the time briefly brings him back to his prime to try to get Phil and Hercules to break up. But ultimately Phil's like, nah, Herc needs me. And Achilles is like, you're right, he needs you. So I like that.
I like that too.
Also, Hercules is the only one who still remembers Achilles. But also, and we want to talk about myth, since Patroclus' dad was actually an Argonaut, and hey, Hercules was also an Argonaut, Hercules actually technically predates Achilles in war and Hercules. And that's great. I love it. I love all myth and retelling and nonsense. Hercules attends Prometheus Academy. I love the show.
It's very good. The movies really, I just would love to have been in the pitch meeting where somebody was like, okay, gospel music from the Black community, but retelling Hercules. And it works.
It works. It's forever shaped my view of the muses.
Yes.
I don't care how much I learn about them. Those
I know.
are the muses in my head forever.
For sure.
Last one I've got from pop culture, because there's a lot of Achilles. There's not a lot of Achilles and Patroclus. And when you do have it, it's like Brad Pitt's playing Achilles and Patroclus is like his younger brother figure. And you're just like, what are we doing here? I don't want to be here anymore.
No, I never want to be in that space.
No. But I do want to be in the space of the Hades game. Always. Megs, have you ever had a chance to play this?
No, I haven't. I only know about it through you.
Aw. Thank you. So yeah, Patroclus and Achilles are in the Hades game. They're both dead because you're in the underworld. And they are separated. Achilles is actually the one who trains Zagreus, your main character, and he lives in the house of Hades as one of the court. And Patroclus, you meet him in, not Asphodel, Elysium. And he is so very sad. He was so very sad. You hear him when you enter the room monologuing, sometimes like talking to Achilles, like, because he thinks Achilles just abandoned him. And Achilles actually made a deal so Patroclus could be in Elysium in exchange for Achilles serving in the House of Hades. Because originally only Achilles got Elysium and Patroclus didn't, which is wild. But okay, I don't make the rules. And it is so much like this Achilles is so hyper aware that he's like, I was arrogant. I caused both of our deaths. Like, this is my fault and I regret it. So I'm trying to make amends to the man I love by giving him paradise and eternity. And Patroclus is like, I died before you, and do you hate me so much you never came to me? Like, did I like embarrass you in my death so thoroughly that you don't love me anymore? And it's like, no. So one of your like things you do is you try to like get them because Achilles like, don't ever talk to Patroclus about me. I don't want him to suffer. And Patroclus like, I don't want to hear about Achilles. Like, that hurts too much. And get them to finally agree to like talk and send messages to each other, and then agree to like try to like break the contract they're in to be together again. And it's so good.
That
And
sounds
just
really
absolutely,
good.
It's so good. So much of the Hades game is taking these stories of tragedy and death and separation and retelling them as stories of hope and reunion and reconciliation. And it's my favorite game, and just cards on the table. One of my favorite stories of all time is the Hades game. But yeah, just from the jump, it's like there is no beating around the bush of like, yeah, no, they were brothers in arms and like closest friends. No, they're husbands.
Yeah.
And it also shows them as like a lot older. Like, these are like older men in their like mid to late 30s in their designs. And I find that interesting, as like seeing, because they would have been older, war and stuff, but I don't know, just the queer relationships and the stories aren't always belonging to the youth.
Yeah.
You have tragedy and reunion and joy as older figures, even when you're dead and in the underworld. And both of them look so great. And when Patroclus is finally happy and not moping anymore, you feel so good. You're like, I did that. I got my teacher and his husband back together. Yay.
Yeah.
They deserve this.
I think that is really beautiful. I mean, when we talk about like the queer community not having elders, that's like largely because queer folks have died young.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think the AIDS epidemic, but as well as just like state-sanctioned violence, shortens the lives of queer folks. And I do think that it's worth sort of taking something like a myth and getting to see like gay people be happy later on is like worth possibly like finding some loopholes in the text of like how old they quote unquote would have been.
No, thank you. Yeah, Megs, thank you for articulating that concept that I was like, that thing. I don't know why it matters to me, but it does. That's why, because tragedy.
Yeah.
It matters because tragedy.
And there's also this pervasive social idea that like queerness is something you grow out of. And so anytime we get to see like a person embodying that that's not true, it's exciting.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's like, no, this is lifelong. Like, this is the rest of experience, and you get to carry it and be part of it and find joy in it for the rest of your life, for decades. And that's wonderful. Yeah.
Like, at some point, you and your partner are going to be old, and like you're still going to have chosen like the life that you're making.
And I love that. I think that is all I've got for any pop culture things, unless, Megs, you've got something else you wanted to talk about, or anything about Achilles and Patroclus and mythology that we haven't dug into yet.
Oh, I think we covered it. I feel like this was like good and thorough. There's so much there. But yeah, I just think that they're a good example of like love not needing to be like clearly defined or put into boxes. And I do wish American queer culture could adopt that a little bit more.
Yeah, it doesn't. If you want it, because you want language and have that, that's awesome. But it's not a thing that that is good to force on everybody else.
Yeah.
Or if necessary for everyone to embrace.
Yeah. If it helps you understand yourself, that's really good, but it doesn't need, you don't need to put it on other people in order to understand them, I don't think.
Yes, exactly. As always, Megs, you find the most concise, strongest way to phrase something. Thank you so much for joining me as my guest co-host today.
So happy to be here.
As was noted, former co-host of Monstrous Woman, former co-host of the Truman Grammar Book Club. Do you have anywhere you want to send folks anywhere to your work, things they can support in the future, or like positive causes in the world that you want to send people to?
Oh, sure. I have a public Instagram, Megs.Peterson, and I mostly just post about like things happening in society. And so if you ever want like easy links to current social issues, they're usually on my Instagram story. And so
That's the best resource for it.
I try to make like myself a shortcut for that. Yeah, so I guess like that's where all my research and stuff is. So I would say just go there. Yeah, and then I would also encourage people to always like be willing to, there's a lot of suffering happening in the world, and I think that we need to remember that it's part of our job as humans to like bear witness to that, even if it's a little bit hard. So do that in whatever ways you can.
Absolutely. I'm glad that DJ already plugged our Patreon because it'd feel really weird to do it now.
Yeah, I changed the whole tone.
The whole tone. No, that's great. But you know what? Respect to DJ, he would have not cared and would have absolutely plowed forward because that is my co-host and brother. I respect him immensely for that skill.
Yeah, we have things to get done, you know?
Yeah, he's like, no, we got things to promote. Let's go. Well, Megs, thank you so much again for joining us on this amazing. I was telling one of my coworkers earlier, I was like, I'm recording. It's probably going to last 2 hours. And she was shocked. 2 hours? What? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's about Achilles and Patroclus. Like, and Megs is going to be there. Like, this is not a 45-minute episode. We've got stuff to dissect.
I continue to lengthen everything I'm on. But yes, thank you for having me.
I love it, Megs. Everyone, send Megs just good vibes, thoughts, and energies for they need it as they endeavor their grad school experience.
Yeah.
Just all the excess energy you have, give it to Megs.
I'd appreciate it.
And then we will be back next week to talk about, oh my gosh, it's time to talk about the Iliad. We're getting into it. I think this was a really good, we've covered all the Achilles and Patroclus stuff. So now we'll be able to move forward and talk about the rest of it all.
Yeah.
Thank you all again for listening. And until next time, don't be like Zeus.
Don't be like Zeus.
Muses of Mythology is created and hosted by Darien and DJ Smart. It's edited by Darien Smart. The show is produced by Darien and DJ Smart, as well as
Tim O'Connor,
The Crystal Con Man.
Nicholas Miller. Our music is Athens Festival by Martin Hain. And our cover art is by Audrey Miller. You can find her on Instagram at Bombshell Nutshell Art.
Want more Muses of Mythology? Support the show on Patreon. Just $1 gets you exclusive bonus content. Get more at patreon.com/Muses of Mythology.
You can also support the show by leaving a review at lovethepodcast.com/Muses of Mythology. Or tell a friend why you love the show.
Don't forget to check out all of our episodes and episode transcripts at musesofmythology.com.
Thanks for listening.